It is great to be here with all of you. Thank you for the warm welcome. I know we're in the middle of a heat wave here in California, but I'm going to tell you guys a story, bring you guys back to something a little bit colder. This is me about 9 months ago attempting to be the first person in history to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported, and unaided. Battling some pretty extreme conditions, as you can see, and certainly finding myself in some precarious spots like this one right here. We got sound, maybe? Turn that up. That's me saying I got caught out in a massive storm. So we'll get some more volume going on in a second from the back. But before I bring you back to all of that, you know, being caught out in this massive storm, attempting world record projects around the world, I want to bring you back because about 11 years ago, my life looked nothing like this. Unfortunately, I found myself here in a hospital room on the other side of the world. So just after graduating from college, I'd always dreamed of traveling the world. Didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid. I painted houses every single summer and saved up. And when I graduated from college, I took a backpack and a surfboard, ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, hitchhiked, lived in youth hostels, but wanted to, spread my wings in the world. It was an amazing experience all until I found myself here on this small beach in rural Thailand. And I was 22 years old at the time, and this looked like a great activity for someone without a fully formed prefrontal cortex. And that is a flaming jump rope, in fact. So, of course, I participated in that event, and unfortunately, in an instant, my life changed. That rope wrapped around my legs and lit my body completely on fire to my neck. Survival mode kicked in when I needed it most, and I jumped into the ocean to extinguish the flames, which ultimately saved my life, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned. I won't make you stare at that for too long. But it was a terrible moment for me, obviously. In an instant, my life changed. And to make matters even worse, I was in a tiny little beach in rural Thailand on an island, so there's no proper hospital. So instead of an ambulance ride, I had a dirt ride on a moped down a dirt path to a one-room nursing station smaller than the size of this stage, where I underwent 8 surgeries. There was a cat running around my bed and across my chest in this makeshift ICU, kind of hammering home the fact that I was very, very far from home and in a dire set of circumstances. And to make matters worse, this doctor came in and he looked me in the eyes. He said, "Colin, you'll never walk again normally." Because the way that the scar tissue they thought had burned through the tendons and the ligaments, and that I wouldn't get back full strength and mobility in my legs. And so that was obviously the physical repercussions were terrible, but the emotional was even worse. Fortunately, there is a heroine to this story, which is this lovely woman right here, my mother. I don't know what's happening. There she is. They're messing around with the AV up front here. Bear with the AV team here. Anyways, this lovely woman, my mother, came on about the 4th or 5th day to my bedside. Now I know she was crying and pleading with the doctors in the hallways for any semblance of good news, completely afraid. I imagine there's some parents in this room, what it would be like to see your kid in this helpless state. But she never showed me that fear. Instead, she came into my hospital room every single day with this smile on her face and this air of positivity, daring me to dream for the future, asking me, "Colin, let's set a goal. Your life's not over." And I look down at my legs and say, what are you talking about? Just depression, deep emotional fatigue. But one day I decided to play along, and I closed my eyes and I said, "Mom, I just pictured myself crossing the finish line of a triathlon." Not something I'd ever done before in my life, but I could see myself in that moment doing that. And so instead of her saying, I said set a goal, but, look at your legs, maybe something a little more realistic, she was like, "Great, let's start training for it." So literally, the next day, much to the chagrin of this Thai doctor, I said, "Doc, I'm training for a triathlon." And so he brought me in some weights, and he's looking at me. You can see somebody knocked some sense into this stupid American kid. This is never going to work. It was 3 months that I was in Thailand in the hospital. When I was flown back to the United States, I still hadn't even taken a single step. I was carried on and off the plane and placed in a wheelchair when I got home. Now, my mother, the wonderful woman she is, she didn't take it easy on me that first morning. I'm in a wheelchair, and she says to me, "Okay, Colin, now I know you've got this big triathlon goal, but today your goal is to take your very first step." She then grabbed this chair from our kitchen table and placed it one step in front of my wheelchair. She said, "Today you need to figure out how to get out of your wheelchair and take a first step into that chair in front of you." It took me 3 hours that day to work up the courage and strength to take that first step. But ultimately, I did it. And then she didn't take it easy on me after that. She tore the chair, took it 5 steps away from me, and the next day 10 steps away. Each day, I could take a few more steps on this long road to recovery. All the while picturing myself being fit and strong and healthy yet again. So, all the while picturing myself being a fit and strong kid. Here I am as a little kid racing, swimming for my first swim race, and here as I'm a collegiate swimmer trying to get back into this mindset of being an athlete. 18 months later, after being burned in this fire, I did honor this goal by moving to Chicago and signing up for the Chicago Triathlon. I dove into the lake of Lake Michigan, swam the first mile, got on my bike, rode 25 miles down Lakeshore Drive, and put my running shoes on and ran 6.2 miles to the finish line, crossing the finish line of the Chicago Triathlon. Thank you. But there was still one surprise in store for me that day, which is I hadn't actually just finished the race, but I actually won the entire Chicago Triathlon. Thank you. It's a very kind audience. I love this. Placing first out of about 5,000 participants on the day. It was a complete and utter surprise to me, certainly in my very first race of my life, having been told not long before I would never walk again normally. But it wasn't a moment where I, patted myself on the back like, oh, I'm this great superhuman athlete, I'm so amazing. My mind immediately back to the Thai hospital, wondering what would have happened had my mom not forced me to look towards the future and set a measurable goal. What would have happened? And I realized that not just myself, but all of us, we have these reservoirs of untapped potential inside of us to achieve extraordinary things when we set our minds to it. So I did the most obvious thing is I quit my day job as a commodities trader in Chicago and went out on the road as a professional triathlete, which is not like most professional sports. It's not lucrative at all. More peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and sleeping on hotel room floors. But an amazing opportunity for me to cultivate my strength and curiosity as an athlete. I ultimately raced in 25 countries on 6 different continents for the U.S. national team. And then in the fall of 2014, I found myself here on the summit of Ecuador's 3rd tallest mountain with a diamond ring in my pocket, asking my longtime girlfriend, Jenna, to marry me. Fortunately for me, she's here somewhere as well, but fortunately for me at 19,000 feet, maybe she just wanted to get down safely, but she did say yes in that moment. But sort of awed and inspired by the mountains around us and wanting to set our next goal in our life, we started dreaming as big as possible. What do we want to do? What impact do we want to have? What do we care about? For me, I still wanted to push myself as an athlete, but in a unique and interesting way with sort of a bigger vision. And so the thing that we dreamed was to see if we could set the world record for something called the Explorers Grand Slam. So to climb the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents, as well as complete expeditions to both the North and South Pole. Fewer than 50 people in history had ever completed the Grand Slam, and I was going to attempt to be the fastest by climbing all the mountains consecutively, back to back, without taking any rest. But the larger vision for Jen and I was to do something and impact health. As I'm sure everyone in this room knows, today's kids are the least active in history, and so we wanted to use this world record project to start a nonprofit and have massive scale and scope of ripple effect of impact in the community. And it was very hard because we didn't have financial support, we knew nothing about nonprofit work and all this, but Jen and I worked on this for a year or two, building this up slowly, and of course my training, and it's apropos to share this in this room, which is, of course, my chiropractor was a key part of my training methodology. Going back to when I was 5 years old, my chiropractor was actually more my primary care physician throughout my entirety of my life, and sort of the bedrock of my health and wellness throughout my entire career, long before I was a professional athlete. Started here with this guy, Steve Kingston, who's been doing this for about 40 years, an incredible guy, fortunate to live about 5 blocks away from his office, and so I would go in there almost weekly throughout my entire life. Then, finally, it was time for me to get dropped off on the frozen continent to begin this expedition. So this is my first taste of Antarctica. A tiny little plane drops me off on the frozen continent. The landscape is desolate and surreal. It kind of feels like standing inside the belly of a ping pong ball, just white in every single direction. And the cold is extreme. Of course, it's Antarctica, but it's hard to put into words. It's so cold that I took a cup of boiling water and threw it into the air, and it immediately turns to ice. So boiling water into ice in an instant, so you can imagine what it's like pulling a sled day by day out there in those conditions. Now, trying to set this world record, I didn't stop just at the South Pole, but I went to the South Pole and immediately went to Mount Vinson, climbed that, the tallest mountain in Antarctica, then to Aconcagua in South America, then to Kilimanjaro, and onward I went, climbing all these mountains with Jenna ever steady at the helm of the expedition logistics in the background. Finally, after 100 days of nonstop climbing, I found myself here at the base of Mount Everest, looking up at the tallest mountain in the world. And instead of having normally about 2 months or so to climb Everest, I was going to have about 3 weeks if I wanted to stay on this world record pace. Now Everest, of course, the summit, I'm sure everyone's heard at least 1 or 2 stories about climbing the tallest mountain in the world, but it starts out treacherous right from the beginning. So this is me walking across what's called the Khumbu Icefall in Everest. This is about a 300-foot chasm that I'm walking foot over. And there's about 40 or 50 of these crossings. This is me with a GoPro strapped to my chest, making my way across the chasm. Always kind of happy, of course, to make it to the other side. Now, I wasn't climbing with any sort of big guided team or anything like that, but I was climbing with just myself and a Sherpa by the name of Pasang Bodhi, and we slowly moved our way up on the mountain, Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, slowly getting our body more acclimatized until we got ourselves to here, which is known as the death zone, above 26,000 feet. With even supplemental oxygen, the human body can't survive for very long. Has anybody read Jon Krakauer's Into Thin Air? We've got see some hands out there. A fascinating book, but it's a book about an Everest tragedy where unfortunately 8 people were killed in an accident climbing in 1996. And this spot right here where I took this image is from that exact same place. And I know this, and so as I'm standing there looking up to approach for the summit, of course, very intimidated by it all. But I get out of my tent and I start climbing through the night, Pasang Bodhi and I, and eventually find ourselves here about an hour from the summit. Now when you're climbing Mount Everest, it's like 1 step, 5 breaths. 1 step, 5 breaths. And to give some context, those mountains you see in the background, those are about 25,000 foot mountains that I'm looking down on. It's like 2 Colorado Rockies stacked on top of each other practically. And then with 1 more step and a few more sort of ounces of courage through the night, we get ourselves to this moment right here. I'm on the summit of Mount Everest! Top of the world! No words can describe. Certainly a proud moment for me in my journey, and it meant that I'd completed 8 of the 9 expeditions for the Explorers Grand Slam. But anyone will tell you, again, any good mountaineer will tell you that the summit is really only halfway. 80% of climbing accidents happen on the descent, and it wasn't until I was going to be back down safely in my tent that I would be safe and sound. Now, it took me several hours, of course, to stumble down, and unfortunately, I wouldn't know it at the time, but 3 people would lose their life on the descent that night. Not anyone I was climbing with, but other people on the mountain in the same conditions. And exhausted, I stumble my way back into Camp 4. And it takes me about an hour or so to get my boots off and get inside. I'm still up in the death zone, but I obviously desperately need some rest. And I grab the satellite phone to call home to Jenna. And she says, how you doing? I'm like, I summited Everest, but I'm exhausted. But no frostbite, no injury. She's like, great, so you're doing all right? Well, in that case, she then says something to me that I would never forget for the rest of my life. She goes, well, Colin, in that case, I need you to put your boots back on. I'm like, excuse me? She's like, yeah, we've been doing some calculating back home, and it just so happens that if you can get to the summit of Mount Everest, the summit of Denali, your final peak, in the next week, you can set not 1, but 2 world records. And I'm like, what? Like, Denali takes a month to climb, best case scenario. She's like, yeah, I've got it all mapped out. Put your boots back on right now. Climb all the way back down to base camp. There's a helicopter waiting for you that'll take you to Kathmandu. No time to sleep overnight and take a shower or a hotel, nothing like that, but an evening flight will take you to Dubai, to Seattle, to Anchorage, and then you'll have about 3 days instead of a month to climb Denali. But if you can do that, 2 world records. I'm like, okay. Like, crackling through the sap phone. I think I can't hear you properly. But, one of my favorite quotes that I've loved throughout my entire life is, he who says he can and he who says he can't are usually both right. And so in this moment, I at least decided to myself, I don't know if we can pull off this crazy plan, but at least I can put my boots back on. I can step out of that tent and move forwards in this journey. Now, somehow, just 100 hours after standing on the summit of Mount Everest, we did pull off Jenna's crazy plan. I arrived at Denali. I could give a whole other speech on those 3 days trying to climb Denali through this crazy storm. No one else on the mountain climbed those few days. But on the afternoon of May 27, 2016, I arrived to the summit of Denali, setting not 1, but 2 world records for the Explorers Grand Slam and the 7th Summit. Thank you. And this moment on the summit was a great moment for me to reflect on the entirety of the journey, the burn accident, all the things that had gone wrong in my life, all the things that had gone right, the people that had loved me and supported me, my family, etc. But more than anything, what I was proud of is that the media success around this project that Jen and I had built from scratch had given us the platform that we wanted to be able to speak to young people in classrooms, to have a platform to make impact. And one of the questions that Jenna started asking young students while I was out there climbing Everest, we had several 100,000 students following along in the country via social media. She started asking this one simple question, which is, what's your Everest? It's an obvious question, right? For kids, it's a metaphor for, what's a big goal that you have in your life? And in a room full of this, a gymnasium of students, you ask that question, and 500 hands shoot up into the air, and they go, Colin, my Mount Everest is to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. Or, my Mount Everest is to make sure the snow leopards get off the endangered species list. All the amazing things that kids dream of. But as I started to ask that question more and more, I started to realize that question is not just relevant for young people, but for every single person, no matter what stage or phase of their life that they're in. And I had literally just climbed Mount Everest, right? 2 world records, but what am I going to do? Just kick my feet up and do nothing with my rest of my life? I needed to ask myself that question, which was, what was my next Everest? And so this was a couple of years ago now, but it was right around the exact same time that I started dreaming of my next 2 projects. And fortunately for me, I got introduced to the wonderful Charlie Dubois at Standard Process, and they really got behind my next 2 projects. So the next big Everest that I had was to do something called the 50 high points, so to climb the tallest mountain in each of the 50 U.S. states faster than anyone had ever done that. The previous record had been 42 days, and somehow with the masterpiece of Jenna's logistics, the support of Standard Process, planes, and RVs, and this crazy thing, I was able to do it in 21 days, all 50 states. But the part that I'm most excited to share about that project, yes, it was fun to set another world record, but the reason we did it in all 50 states is we wanted to do something where we could impact everyone. Yeah, the tallest mountain in Florida is a 350-foot hill on the side of the road. It's not super challenging to climb. But through the amazing network of Standard Process practitioners, students, young people, all the people we were connecting with, we did something called the Forrest Gump effect, which was we invited any person to come out, climb a mountain with us, meet us at a trailhead, hike to the top of a peak, and we had people from all across the country. Here I am in Illinois, not pictured here, but there was actually an 85-year-old woman that climbed the tallest point in Illinois with me. It was only a 1 hour hike, but she did the whole thing with me, told me about her life. We had young kids join us throughout this entire journey, families connecting in the outdoors. It was a really incredible way to really bring the community together. And then, of course, none other than Mr. Charlie Dubois himself joined me. That guy's quite a fierce climber. If you ever get a chance, I think he's going to be up here on the stage a little bit later, but CEO of Standard Process. So after this record, well, I was very proud of it, but I had started to think of myself less as an athlete and more as an artist, and that these world record projects were just really my canvas to paint on. And so I thought, what would a true artist want to do? And a true artist wants to create something unique in the world, do something that no one has ever done before. So in the world of exploration, there was a world first that had never been conquered, which was a solo, unsupported, and unaided crossing of Antarctica. Now, solo, of course, means completely alone. Unsupported means no resupplies of food or fuel. So whatever you take with you in your sled, you've got to carry it with you the entirety of the journey. Enough food and supplies to get across. And unaided means no use of kites or dogs or anything else to support you. Just mano-a-mano, solo, across the frozen continent 1,000 miles via the South Pole. Now, I didn't just come up with this crazy plan. This is not something that I just made up. This has been in the zeitgeist of the exploration community for quite some time. In 1914, Ernest Shackleton was the first one to attempt this. I'm sure that's a name that many of you recognize from the history books. But fast forward 100 years, still no one had completed this journey until Henry Worsley, a British explorer, attempted it. And tragically, after 900 miles and just 100 miles from the finish line and 71 days into his journey, he fell ill and ultimately died attempting this crossing. And then Ben Saunders, who's often thought of as one of the fittest and strongest and most accomplished polar explorers in the world, attempted it in 2017. And after 54 days, he ran out of food and supplies and cut his margins too thin and had to be called and picked up for rescue and was unable to make the crossing himself. And so after all these unsuccessful attempts, the media started to say, you know what? This Antarctica crossing, it's impossible. Wired magazine writes here, it is straight up impossible to take enough calories with you to cross the entire continent of Antarctica. And it was in this moment that Jen and I started our dreaming, started thinking, is this possible? Can we do this? We literally decided we're going to try this project, but we're going to call it the impossible first because we straight up don't know if it's possible at all. It wasn't to say that because we thought, people say it's impossible, we're so great, we know we can do it. It was the opposite, to say this might literally be impossible, but stepping this far out of our comfort zones is of value because even if we fail, we're going to learn something along the way. And having this tremendous support from Standard Process and the chiropractic community and all of this, it's been such an important bedrock of our success. I sat down with Charlie and I said, we're going to try something that might be impossible, and I'd love to have you guys involved because I think that there's something that we can figure out about, biochemistry, nutrition, health that cracks the code to this impossible, seemingly impossible problem. Some of you are probably aware of this, but Standard Process opened this incredible facility in North Carolina called the Nutrition Innovation Center. And right as it was opening, I was kind of one of their first test cases in there. So they brought me around and wrapped me with the best doctors, nutritionists, food scientists, chiropractors, all the best practitioners that they wrapped around me to try to solve this puzzle. Took multiple blood tests from me and figured out my exact physiology. So much research came from that we're ultimately going to publish, but one of the most amazing things that came from that was a custom food that they created for me, which they called the Colin bar. They probably could have come up with a more creative name, but that's what we went with. But basically, it was a custom food that I was going to take with me in the entirety of Antarctica journey, as I was going to burn 10,000 calories per day, and it was going to be very hard for me to carry that much weight. Ultimately, my sled weighed 375 pounds, but I had this food that was particularly customized for my body, my nutrition, my exact physiology, and my inflammation responses and stuff through all of this research. And so I chucked my sled completely full of this to see if that would be the key to cracking the code on what had been impossible for previous explorers. Now, as I was departing for Antarctica, this was November, so 9 months ago, I'm getting on the plane to depart, and I find out that I'm actually not the only person attempting this project this season. There's going to be somebody else out there, and now it's a race, quite literally. Meet Captain Lou Rudd. Quite an intimidating man, to say the least. And when I say at the same time, I mean that literally there's one guy who owns one plane that can take you to the edge of Antarctica. And there's only one season when you can do it. And so me and Captain Lou, this guy, are shoulder to shoulder in this tiny little cargo plane being flown to the edge of the frozen continent. As he starts to tell me, I've trekked more miles in Antarctica than any living explorer, 3,000 so far. How many have you done? I've done one expedition, 60 miles, very inexperienced compared to him. He's like, I served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kosovo. He's a decorated war military veteran, very proud and strong guy, and I'm getting more intimidated by the moment, but trying to kind of keep a straight face. And you can see here, after all the British exploration in Antarctica, he certainly thinks that a Brit should crack this first. So he's looking at this young American kid thinking, you know what, this is, I'm going to get inside of your head. But sure enough, we got dropped off just 1 mile apart from each other, equidistant from the first waypoint to begin this journey, and here I am in that moment.
I'm about to be all alone out here. The journey begins. I'm feeling really excited. It's calm, blue sky, no wind right now, so I guess I couldn't have asked for a better day to start.
It's always funny when I watch this video, I'm always like so excited. It's minus 25 outside. I turn off the video, and the first thing that happens is I reach down for my sled, and I pull the strap, and the plastic strap, ping, breaks. I haven't even taken a single step, and things are beginning to break. And now Lou is 1 mile away from me, equidistance. We have 1,000 miles to go to somehow make it across this journey. But here I am just 3 hours into this 1,000-mile journey at this point.
Oh my God. This is harder than I ever dreamed possible. I'm only 3 hours into the journey, and I'm already having so many doubts. It's just so heavy.
Not exactly the start I was hoping for. And if you look very closely up there, you'll see that there's actually frost on my nose. Why is that? Well, in the first couple hours there, I actually started crying. But what happens when you're crying and it's minus 25 outside? Well, the tears, they actually freeze immediately to your face, which is an overall pathetic thing. And if it couldn't get any worse in those first few hours, what do I see on the horizon? Oh, Captain Lou casually just, boom, smooth and steady, just pulling his sled, not having any problems, no issue. And so I'm in a pretty tough set of circumstances. So you might see a theme here, but I reach for my satellite phone and I call home to Jenna. She knows all the logistics in the background, and she's like wondering why I'm calling her just a couple hours into my very first day. And I go, well, babe, I think we may have named our project the right thing. It appears it's impossible. I cannot pull this sled. She's like, okay, well, how far are you away from the first waypoint? She knows that I have these waypoints on my GPS marking the route, and the first one's not very far. I'm like, I'm 0.54 miles away from the first waypoint. She's like, okay, so you're half a mile from the first waypoint. Calm down, take a deep breath. I know the sled is heavy, but do me a favor, pull the sled to the first waypoint, go to bed, forget about Captain Lou, and hopefully when you wake up in the morning, you can just make some more steady progress. So sure enough, I get to that first waypoint, I settle in for the night. And I wake up in the morning, I'm pretty defeated already, and I have, pretty basically still have 1,000 miles to go. But I'm a big believer that we're the stories that we tell ourselves. I say a lot of mantras to myself, but I've never said this to myself. I need like a pump-up speech. So I sit up in my tent all alone, and I yell into the, endless Antarctica wait. I go, Colin, you are strong, you are capable. You are strong, you are capable. I don't believe a word that I'm saying, but I'm just like somehow trying to like pump myself up to get back out of the tent and keep pulling the sled. And I wish I could say it was like so easy from there on out. But the next 4 or 5 days were just the same. More frozen tears, more grinding, just pulling this sled, long forgetting about Lou, trying to find some calm and peace in my mind. I have a meditation practice and actually deleted all the content off my phone so I could spend almost all the time in silence trying to find these flow states in my mind. And that seemed like a terrible idea at that point. I was like, I need a distraction. Why did I delete all that content? On the day 6, in a whiteout, to my complete and utter surprise, I spotted this on the horizon, which is another tent. Now, I was pretty sure I wasn't just there was not the only person out there. I knew that there was one other person. I had stumbled across Captain Lou's tent, so I tried to kind of stealthily come past him in this whiteout, but as I'm coming past, I hear this cough and this unzipping of the tent, and Captain Lou kind of puts his head out and kind of waves at me like it's the Queen of England or something like that, and I'm just kind of stunned, but I just wave back and just casually keep going forwards and battling. And I decided to myself in that day, no matter what happens, I'm going to stay out here every day longer than Captain Lou. If he stays out here for 10 hours, I'm going to stay out here for 11. If he stays out here for 11, I'm going to stay out here for 12. And that means no matter what the weather, I can't take a day off, I can't take a break, otherwise I'll run out of food or he'll pass me. And so I keep grinding no matter what happens, day in and day out. Now, I've talked a lot about pulling my sled, but there's a lot of other things that go into being in Antarctica by yourself. Setting up your tent, shoveling snow, getting inside the tent, managing all the different sort of systems in there, melting snow to turn it into water. I've got this satellite modem that I'm sending a grainy image out to school kids that are following along this project. There's about 5 hours of work on either side of the day. It turns into a 17-hour day every single day on repeat. The sun never sets, under complete 24 hours of daylight, day in and day out, grinding. Eventually, after 40 days, I do arrive at my next major waypoint, which is the South Pole, the stopping place for most expeditions, but of course not my end goal. I'm trying to get to the other side of the continent. You'll see some buildings in the background here, and that's because there's scientific research that's going on at the South Pole. But if I were to go inside or take a cookie or drink a cup of coffee from a scientist, that would nullify my complete solo, unsupported, unaided journey. So after 40 days of dragging my sled to the South Pole, I took a couple quick selfies here and continued on my way. Little did I know that the next 8 days were going to be, quite honestly, the hardest of my entire life. So in a whiteout in Antarctica, when the storms come in, 24 hours of daylight, but it's just white in every direction. So imagine closing your eyes and walking down a dark hallway. You're going to slam into the wall pretty quickly. We're not built to walk in straight lines very well. So I've got this, compass strapped to my chest. I'm staring down at it. I'm trying to make my way through these whiteout day after day. The next 8 days were just pounding me. This is an example here of what it looked like. It's about minus 80 degree wind chill at this point, minus 30 degree ambient with 50 mile per hour winds, about minus 80 degree wind chill. You can see how hard it is for me to just walk upwind to pick up my camera. Now, I'm not proud of this, but to save on weight, I actually didn't even bring an extra pair of underwear with me, so I literally have no extra supplies at all, so certainly I didn't have an extra tent. And so you can imagine the stakes when it's 50, 60 mile per hour of wind, you're in the middle of Antarctica by yourself. If I don't tie a rope properly or get it secured, boom, I let go of my tent gone, alone in Antarctica, no hope for rescue. And I was getting pretty beat down by this point. Although the nutrition was as dialed as it possibly could be, I was inevitably losing weight because I knew that I was burning at least 10,000 calories a day, and the most that I could carry was 7,000. So I was losing weight every single day. I was getting pretty weak, and eventually on the 48th day, completely exhausted from this relentless storm, I found myself in my tent in this moment.
Day 48. It's the first time in the project I'm feeling like I just wish I could quit. Not doing good.
Certainly a low point, you'll start to see all this tape over my face, and that's because with all of that high wind, that was beginning to form frostbite on my face, even though I had complete, mask over it. The tiny little piercing of minus 80 degree wind chill was piercing my mask, and here I am in this moment just wanting to quit, wanting to give up. But I was reminded of one of my favorite allegories from a book, The Alchemist, that says, we often die of thirst when crossing the desert alone, just a few moments before seeing the palm trees on the horizon. This reminder that if we can keep somehow putting one foot in front of the other, we will eventually reach our finish line. Another one of my favorite mantras from my meditation practice, this too will change. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. And I get out of my tent and I continue battling onwards weekly. Finally, on the 53rd day, I wake up and it's Christmas Day. And for the first time in well over a week, it's crystal clear and still. I'm so grateful for that. And I get up out of my tent, I pack it up again, and I start pulling my sled. And I realize that I'm only 77 miles away from the finish, closer than any human has ever been to completing this crossing of Antarctica. And I start doing math in my head. Something feels different in my brain. I start doing math. I start going, okay, 77 miles. Well, my average has been about 15 or 20 miles per day at my best. And so what am I, 3 or 4 days out? If I do a big push, how much longer is it going to take me out here? But then all of a sudden, I found that flow and this calm in my mind, this peace. And I realized, you know what? I'm not going to stop. How many more hours is it going to take for me to pull my sled? And I do the rough calculation. Maybe it's 40 hours. Well, the sun never sets here. What if I keep going? What if I don't stop at all? 5 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours. Now further than I've ever gone in a single day. My family, it's Christmas Day back home, and they're tracking me on the live satellites, and they can see that I haven't stopped. But I don't send a note, I just keep going. 15 hours, 20 hours goes by. After 20 hours, a huge storm blows up. It's called a ground blizzard. It's not snowing from above, but it's blowing so hard that the loose snow is blowing everywhere, like being inside of a blender, inside of a shaken snow globe. But that storm can't touch me because I found the peace and calm in my body and mind. Even though my body is weakened, I'm strength inside. And so 20 hours, 25 hours deep in this flow state, reflecting on the entirety of this journey, everything that got me there, 30 hours, 32 hours, and after 32 hours, I finally spot in the distance this post that marks the edge of the Antarctic continent. I'm just a quarter mile away from completing the first crossing. And instead of racing to the pole and touching it, I sit down for a second, and I meditate, and I breathe in the moment, sending gratitude and love to all the people that supported this, all the people that I couldn't have been there, although I was sitting there alone. This was a village that created this project. And then I finally get up, and I take that last few steps and reach the post in this moment here.
It's official. I just made history. I feel like I have so much more to say, but I'm just so drained. I'm so tired.
Perhaps not my most articulate acceptance speech. Thank you. But a beautiful moment nonetheless. Of course, I reach for my satellite phone. My family is also gathered on Christmas, or the day after Christmas at this point, after 32 hours straight push, and exchange some more frozen, joyful tears with them. And as badly as I want to get out of this underwear, I've pretty much run out of food, very close to it at this point, and get a shower and get the heck out of Antarctica. I realize that Captain Lou is just 3 days behind me. And so I elect to stay there and wait for him so I can be the first person to congratulate on him on amazing success as well, because out of 7 billion people, he's really the only other person that truly understands what it takes to make this crossing, and I wanted to honor him as somebody who I have a great deal of respect and honor for. And so finally, the two of us, he completes his journey, and the two of us get picked up on a plane. We flew back to this encampment in Antarctica and eventually back to Punta Arenas in southern Chile, where Jen and I were reunited, which was amazing. And I ran into Jenna's arms. She gives me a big hug. It's amazing. She's like, I bet you're dying to get back to your bed in Portland and go to sleep and rest and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I can't wait. We fly in there tomorrow. She goes, no, we are not. Tomorrow, we're flying to a different place. We are flying to New York City, and you're going to be on the Today Show. Which normally would be kind of a cool thing. But if you've not talked to anybody for 2 months straight and you've been all alone in the middle of Antarctica, it is very, very disorienting to be in Manhattan of all places, let alone on live television under the bright lights of the Today Show. But we did get Hoda and Savannah to try the Colin bars and shout out Standard Process, so that was pretty cool, part of that. But all jokes aside, I was humbled by all the press and media attention. Ultimately, there were about 2 billion media impressions over the course of this expedition. The world really got behind it, which I was pretty unaware of while I was out there. It was quite a storm when I came back. But one question kept coming up over and over again in every interview that I would take. They would say something like, Colin, are you a superhuman? It's a weird question to be asked, right? I'm like, took me a second to respond to it. But then my response became simple. I would say, yeah, I am a superhuman, and so are you, and so are you, and so are you, so are we all. It just depends on how we flex and develop this muscle right here, the 6 inches between our ears. Because we all know this. Inevitably in life, it's tough, right? We all face setbacks, moments of doubt. Here I am, I showed you this video of me sitting alone in my tent, wanting to give up, wanting to quit. Full of these questions that fill all of our minds in these tough moments. Should I give up? Is this even possible? Why me? Why am I out here? But I've come to realize that only one question truly matters when facing great obstacles, which is, how will we respond? In those moments, we all have a choice. Are we going to choose fear or love? Is this an insurmountable obstacle or a huge opportunity for growth? Because no matter what, I'm sure of this, achievement is not for the select few. Achievement is simply for those who never quit. It is for those who set goals. It is for those who put the most steps in front of the other, but more than anything, achievement is simply for those who can overcome the greatest obstacle of all, their own minds. And when we all switch our mindset towards a positive outcome, we realize there is a reservoir of untapped potential inside of us to achieve extraordinary things. Masterpieces to be painted on the canvas of any of ours choosing. My canvas just happens to be the ends of the earth and mountaintops. And I don't blame you if you don't want to go freeze your butt off in the middle of nowhere by yourself. That's actually normal. But I know that there is something inside all of us. That's why we're in this room, because we're passionate about what we do, what we care about, changing the world, having resonant impact around health and wellness and people's well-beings. And so I urge you to answer that question for yourself, which is, what is your Everest? What is a big goal in your life that maybe feels a little bit out of reach, that you're almost afraid to speak out loud because, maybe it's just a little bit too hard? Because the process of actually getting there seems too challenging. But I want to leave by saying, the process might be more simpler than you think. Answer that question. What's your Everest? What's your masterpiece? And then set a goal. Take your first steps. The chair, it's right in front of you. And when your steps get you there, push the chair further. Make it to the next waypoint. As you go along this journey, it will happen. You will be sitting alone in your proverbial tent with a storm raging on the outside, wanting to give up, full of doubt, full of fear. What then? Jenna's words. Put your boots back on. Let go of fear. Step outside the tent. Step outside of your comfort zone, because that is where the most profound growth happens. And lastly, I hate to admit this, but it's true, when we dare to dream greatly, when we dare to impact people around us, when we dare to change the world, some near us, even people that love us sometimes, will say, you know what? Your hopes, your dreams, your goals, they might be impossible. I don't know. What then? Simple. Remember, you are strong. You are capable. You are possible. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I don't even know what she just said, but here's what we're going to do. Have a seat real quick, everybody. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take 2 questions, and then I promise you, Colin's going to be at the SP booth outside. You can get pictures, you can ask questions, he'll do, signatures and autographs, but what an amazing story. So we want to give a couple people, a chance to ask some questions. So if you've got a question that you want to ask, go ahead and raise your hand. First one I see. Nobody? Go ahead.
What's your next goal?
Okay, his question is, what's your next goal?
What's
your
next
next
goal?
Everest?
Certainly, I'm still asking myself that question. So this year, I've been flexing, like I said, a different muscle. I've been writing a book. So I have a book due out the first week of February, going through this entire journey, my health journey and all of that. So that's been fun, but I have my next big world record project planned. It's not public yet, but I will be announcing that in the next month or so, so stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting adventure, and I hope all of you tune in for that. And certainly another Everest to climb, per se. Yeah.
How much weight did you lose on that journey?
Yeah.
How much weight did he lose on that journey was the question.
And what did you do to prepare as far as weight goes before you went on?
Yeah, so the question's about how much weight that I lost throughout the journey. Like I said, we knew I was going to burn about 10,000 calories or plus. We did all that research in the Nutrition Innovation Center with Standard Process to really figure out, how I was burning energy, what type of fuel I needed out there, et cetera. And we realized that I was going to lose a significant amount of weight just because, even though the food was as clean as it possibly could be, I literally couldn't physically carry any more than 375 pounds. I mean, you saw that first video. I literally couldn't carry 1 extra pound. I was going to give up. And so in anticipation of that, we changed my sort of physiology and added about 20 pounds, about 12 to 14 pounds of lean muscle, and then about 6 pounds on top of that of extra actual just fat on top of that, very strategically with the doctors, with the incredible team at Standard Process there. And then I ultimately lost about 25 or 30 pounds, so I ended up about 10 pounds underweight. But is in contrast to Captain Lou, again, I have a lot of admiration for him, but he lost about 50 plus pounds. And when we did all the blood work, when I came back, actually right before flying to New York, I actually stopped in Charlotte to get all my blood work done immediately off the ice to finish this longitudinal study. And what we found is that my health was exponentially greater than we thought it would be. My actual weight loss was, I actually kept on about 10 or 15 pounds more than I thought. And as you compared it to me and Captain Lou and how well our bodies broke down, it was a significant difference. And certainly I use a huge testament to the Colin bars and all of the work and the science and research we did in the back end, which I'm excited to publish because I think that it has sort of applications for other explorers, but certainly applications around customization of food and nutrition and health and the importance of that. And to be able to do that not in some weirdly chemical derivative way, but to do that with whole food nutrition, all plant-based ingredients, coconut oil, nuts, seeds, organic supplements is a testament and certainly something that I'm proud to share with the world. I'm going to be back at the booth over there, so happy to answer any more questions.
Give him a round of applause again. Let's step. Let's give him some energy. Give him some love.
Thank you.